We're online. Okay.
Oh, you're muted, Giselle.
Sorry. Hi, Raha.
Hi, how are you?
Good, and you?
I'm good.
Okay.
No?
We are with Artie. Artie, Raha is also part of our Nyoni team.
Beautiful. Hi, Raha. Nice to
Hi,
meet you.
Ati. Nice to meet you too. Let me put my video so you can see me.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
So we are waiting a little bit. I think we'll give some time. I've sent some reminders right now.
Okay. All right.
So maybe give a little bit of time.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah. But your presentation looks already good. I'm excited.
Oh, I will tell you after the presentation. If well, you can tell me after the presentation if it was good
Okay.
or not. Yeah.
Let's give time to people.
Giselle, in the meantime, do you want to tell us what Neone does and when you were founded? Just an introduction.
Well, but it's only the three of us, so I'm waiting a little bit.
What about the live? Anyone watching the live?
Yes, but I still want to wait a little bit before to make sure that people will actually listen to what I'm going to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But no problem, of course I'll do that. Of course I am going to do that. We are waiting for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to miss that session. Very good and useful information that you could pay for $100.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the opportunity to get that for free. It's true. Ah la la. Okay. Geoffrey, are we on live on all the platforms?
Yes, we are already live. 5 minutes now. YouTube and Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, they're already running. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Edgar has just joined us, my husband, Artie.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay. Hi, Raha. Hi, Geoffrey.
Hi, Edgar. How are you?
Hi,
Hey, how are you?
hi, Edgar. Welcome.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and share the links if you can. The YouTube, Facebook. If you're online, you can go ahead and share it.
Yes, that's what I'm going to do. And then you can also tell me if you see people on live, right? Either on Facebook or on our YouTube. So
Okay.
that's maybe we can start when if you see people connecting.
Although some will catch up later, if you you start at least because it's recorded,
Yeah.
people can come and catch up.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are going to start. What time is it now? Oh yeah. In 2 minutes, guys. We are starting in 2 minutes. But please join. I'm going to share the link. You don't want to miss that session with Audrey. Ah, la 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 la. Karibu, karibu, like we say in Kenya. Welcome to that session. Bienvenue. You don't want to miss it. Don't want to miss it. Okay, okay, okay. Oh. So I think we are going to start. Okay, so let's start right now. So hello everyone. Thank you for being with us, Artie. Thank you, Geoffrey, Edgar, Raha, and all the others who are going to join, I hope, in a few minutes. So let me, maybe for those of us who have never heard about Nione, introduce to you our organization. So Nione Initiative Foundation is an organization that has saw the light, if I can say so, almost 2 years ago. And Nione, for those who don't speak Kiswahili, means Simi. So Simi, it's the cry of a person or a child with autism spectrum disorder to the community. And it's actually an invitation to us to see them just like we see others. And by doing so, then we will consider their rights, their feelings, their needs, just like we do consider those aspects for each one of us. So that's the reason why we've put the name Nione to our organization. Now, what do? Briefly, we reach out to families and people, and especially children affected with autism spectrum disorder, and we advocate for inclusion in all the sphere of the community. And we do that through awareness sessions, sensitization, and training. So our main target for now is the community at large, of course, but specifically we target churches so that these families can fully express the talent and will be also part of all the activities within this setup and the community at large. So this basically very briefly what Nione does. I invite you also to check our different platform, our different social media platform, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and our website that Geoffrey will share maybe towards the end of this webinar. But without further ado, let me introduce to you, or actually she will introduce herself, our guest, our Artie that I've met virtually a few months ago. And we are really fortunate and blessed to have her as a partner, and also to to have her sharing her tools, not only to us, but also all the parents out there or caregivers who would like to know more on how to empowering or building our children's language skill. So Artie, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Giselle. Thank you very much for inviting me to to facilitate a second webinar for you. And thanks to everyone, whoever's there, to come spend your time listening to what I have to say. So I'm Artie. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I work in Australia. Currently, I'm working at 5 different primary schools, and I predominantly work with children with speech, language, and literacy issues. Previously, this is actually my 10th year working, so it's a bit of a milestone, and I'm very proud of it. But in the 10 years, I've had an opportunity to work in early intervention, which was with children with disabilities and their families. And I've had an opportunity to work in a clinic setting. So again, with kids, I've worked in a hospital. So adults with strokes, brain injuries, swallowing problems. And finally, I got to working in schools, which is where my main passion lies. In saying that, speech and language pathologists tend to work with people. It could be any age, literally from birth to death, but we can work in the areas of speech, language, social skills, voice, fluency, which, stammering, stuttering. Then we also have a part in swallowing and literacy skills, and a few more that I actually haven't had a chance to mention. So, sorry, before I move on, today's webinar is going to be about language nutrition. So building your child's language skills. And these are going to be generalized language skills. But in my first webinar with Neone Initiative, I talked about communication skills. And I'll go through a tiny bit of a recap, but this particular webinar will mainly be to understand a range of strategies and techniques to stimulate your child's language. And it really doesn't matter what age your child is, because of course, there'll be some strategies that are particularly for younger children. However, some of them are for older children, and a lot of them are quite universal. The next thing we will be doing is exploring different types of activities you as an adult can engage in with your children. Then I'll show you an example of a very simple activity. Doesn't require a lot of tools, but it can be language rich. And then we'll conclude this session with a question and answer round. Okay. So in this slide, let's discuss the actual difference between speech, language, and communication. So as a speech and language pathologist, these terms are interconnected, but they're also different. So with speech, to me, that means articulation. So I'm using my teeth, my tongue, the roof of the mouth, my lips, to make certain sounds and to make very precise sounds and to make these sounds in words. So the actual pronunciation of words. And in order to do that, I need my voice. So the actual workings of vocal folds to ensure that the voice is at the right volume. And the air is coming out of the mouth or the nose and it coming out correctly. So we talk about it as airflow. And the third element to speech is fluency. So that's our rhythm of speech. How smooth is our speech? Or do we have stutter-like tendencies, which makes the speech slightly bumpy? So that's all to do with the speech part of it. And for language, let's think about language in terms of words, phrases, sentences, short sentences, long sentences. And these there are two components to language. So one is the listening and comprehension part of language. So are we actually understanding what someone is telling us? And the second part of language is, are we able to express these language skills? And with both, so we call it receptive, which is the understanding, and expressive, which is the actual expression of language. It actually has mental representations behind it. So, you know, when you want to convey your thoughts, your ideas, you have memories, you have opinions, you have beliefs, wishes, they're all called mental representations. And so we use them to actually convey our message. So there are 3 points on this slide, and really one of it is very much to do with language nourishment or language nutrition. So just as we would nourish our human body with healthy food, our brains require nourishment through language. So since the time a child is born, we are talking to the child starts to communicate. They don't have to have any words, because we know when children are born, they don't have words, but they might have a cry, they might vocalize, they might tell you in some way or the other that they have a need that needs to be met. Now, decades of research has actually demonstrated that good oral language skills set a good solid foundation for cognitive ability, school readiness, literacy, and ultimately educational achievement. So really, these skills that I'm going to talk about during today's webinar, while they're for children, it's actually setting them up for a good chance at school and right into their adulthood. And we're going to talk about the quality and quantity of these words that provide a child with a fantastic potential that's likely to have a good impact later on in life. Okay, so in this particular slide, we're going to talk about a particular analogy. So we're going to, these are strategies particularly for young children from the time they are born, really. So did you know that you can build a child's brain just by talking to them? And I say just by talking to them, but it's a very important part of a child's life. They've come into this world and they actually don't really know what things are, and their world might be their room or might be their house. So let's think about an analogy for a minute and think about a game of tennis. So researchers actually use the term serve and return of interactions. And by serve, they mean when the child is actually showing interest in something. And the child can show interest by looking at something, point to something, walk towards something. If they can't do any of that, they might move their arms and legs, but it's the adult's job to notice that the child is showing an interest in something. And the more we notice, we'll be able to help build their curiosity, and it will in turn strengthen relationship between the child and adult. That's step number 1 for understanding the child's and the child's role in communication. Then step number 2 is the adult returning that serve. Now, once you've noticed that a child is interested in something, be supportive and encourage the child. The child might bring a ball to you, and you might say a word of encouragement and say thank you. Or you might give them a smile, and that to them says, oh, you're noticing that I'm interested in something. Or they might be dancing, and you can have a little dance with them. So you're sharing that shared focus on whatever they're interested in. And the third thing is the thing that they're interested in. It could be they might be looking outside, or they might have an object, might have a ball, or they might be pointing to something on the TV. It doesn't matter what it is, but you can name it for them. whether if it's a red ball, say it's a red ball. If they're pointing outside, you might say, oh yes, you're pointing outside at the garden. Tell them what it is, because they actually don't know. But once you tell them what it is, you are getting them to understand these words and that the words have a meaning to it. So give it a name, and that's step number 3, and you can see that on the slide. Then step number 4 is take turns. So once the child has shown their interest, you've returned that serve that they've demonstrated, you've given it a name, then wait, see what the child does. As you wait for that child, it gives them time to process information. It gives them time to develop their ideas. It gives them time to think about what to do next. So it's actually given them time to mentally process what's being told to them. But so frequently in today's world, we actually find it difficult to give the child that time. And because of that difficulty, they are finding it harder to process this information, which subsequently leads to them not being independent till a later age. So that is to do with taking turns and waiting. Then the next one is making it a daily practice. So every day, if you had an opportunity, which you do as adults, to have a look at what is the child interested in. So you're taking the child's lead. They're interested in something, and as they're younger, they won't have a lot of attention, but that's okay. But you've still acknowledged that they're interested in something. They've ended that interest and they've moved on to something else. And then you take their lead and move on to the next thing. So you can label that other thing that they're interested in. There is a start and stop to those activities, but acknowledging it and taking their lead assists in building their vocabulary. They know what the space, or they have more of an opportunity to understand the world they're in. So even while they might not speak, they're still absorbing this information. They're still learning that with words are matched to actions, they're matched to objects, and you're talking to them. And so they're learning that if someone talks to me, I can take a turn and I can communicate with them. Whether it's through words, it might be through vocalizations, it might be through a cry, facial expressions, name it. So they're the 5 strategies, particularly for young children. And I've included a link in there. So it's a short 6-minute video by Developing Child Harvard University. And it shows you very explicitly how the child serves, so how they're showing interest in something, and what the adult does to respond to that serve. So they're returning in that interaction. This particular slide, again, explicitly explains. So these wonderful slides are by a couple of people in Western Australia, and they partnered to be able to provide this free information, and their website is later on. It's in the last slide, I think. So this particular slide goes through the 5 strategies and actually tells you what each strategy is and a reason for why that strategy is there. And a lot of it is to do with building the child's vocabulary, providing rich language. So you're therefore then actually building neural pathways in their brain to help them understand their world. Okay, now this is an important slide to go, sure, we might label something, but when we label something, it's never a single word on its own. It's a word, but it's attached to lots of different meanings and lots of different information to do with that one word. So let's take, for instance, a baking activity. And you want to bake a cake with your child. You might go, okay, let's bake a cake. And the first one, and we'll go from bottom to top. And once you label it, in that particular example, it tells you we're going to make a chiffon. Now, a chiffon is a very specific type of cake. So if I just said we're going to make a cake, it's very general. It could be any cake. But if I say we're going to make a chiffon, it immediately makes you think of something different. It's a light, fluffy cake, which is the next step up. It's telling you about what it feels like. It tells you, you then have the opportunity to talk about what a cake tastes like. Followed by that, you can then tell your child that, oh, you know what? We don't actually eat cakes every day at every meal. It's a very special food that we can have during celebratory events. So you are slowly developing a richness in language. You're using rich words, you're telling the child about when you use the cake, what it feels like, what it tastes like, and therefore developing their language system. And remember, during all of this, you're talking in sentences. Whether you talk in long sentences or short sentences, depending on how much your child can cope with, that's okay. That's not a problem, but you're showing them, you're giving them an experience, and you're showing them how the word cake is deepened into their language system. So this particular example goes through the label, goes through the attribute, which is a feature of a cake, goes through the function. What do we do with the cake? Do we eat it? Do we have it as a decoration? So it allows you to discuss that. Then it goes through association. So what might, when might you use it? Then you have your so your synonyms, your antonyms. So, in French, a cake is called a gâteau. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But so it gives you an opportunity to actually discuss other words and discuss other meanings. The next one. Okay, so we'll go through a few more techniques. Now, these are particularly for older children, might be 4, 5, 6, doesn't matter. Okay, so these ones, self-talk. So self-talk is when you as an adult are doing something and you're talking about what you're doing. So I might be brushing my hair and I might go, oh, I'm brushing my long black hair. But I also need to be mindful that I have the opportunity to use rich and sophisticated vocabulary. So I might go, oh, I'm brushing my long silky hair. And that gives it more meaning and more depth to that sentence. And if the child is near you, and when you should be probably self-talking, when they're there, they might be looking at it, they might be listening to it. And again, you are showing them that you use words that are attached to actions, that are attached to objects, and many more. Then in parallel talk, so this is when a child is doing something and you as an adult actually have the role of a commentator. So the child might be moving a car and you might go, oh, look, Peter is moving the car, or Peter is playing with the car. And you might go, Peter is playing with the red car, or you might go, Peter is playing with the red Jeep. So you have the opportunity to lengthen these sentences, but you are giving your child the words. And again, remembering that language is about the understanding. You're getting them to understand it, for which they'll put these words in a bank and say it later on. The next one is expansion. So expansion is basically adding. So the child might tell you something, I want drink, and you might add a grammatical unit to it, and you might go, I want to drink now. So you've added the tense to it. So you've expanded the child's sentence, and in that you're actually modeling how a sentence can work with the correct grammar, but you've also lengthened it and you've modeled it to the child. So this gives you, a lot of our children, they have difficulty, particularly with tenses, your past, present, and future. And because it's in a timeline, times are very abstract. So it's fantastic to be able to really model these sentences to our children. And they, make for really good sort of tuning their brains into grammar as well. The next one is recast. So recast is saying the child might say a sentence, and the sentence might be like, I go to toilet. And kids tend to have these errors, which it's developmental, they're still learning. So you might then go and say, oh, I want to go to the toilet. So you're not actually telling the child that the child is wrong, but you're telling the child, you're modeling the correct grammatical form, and that's called a recast. Now, the next skill is build up or breakdown. So again, with the example of the red car, oh, Peter's moving the red car. Oh, Peter's moving the red Jeep on the road. So you're actually building up the sentence by adding more information to it. And you're showing, when you are saying it and the child is engaged in the activity, they're starting to take that information on. And again, let's remember the waiting time and see what the child will be doing. So your turn taking and waiting, and you can build it up to the length that you are satisfied with as an adult, and then break it down to simplify it so your child can understand it again. And you're not building it up as a test so that they must know it, but you're building it up so that they know, they can understand more words as they're doing the actions. Now, I'll just stop here for a bit, but ask if there are any questions before I move on to the next slide. Okay.
It's okay.
Thank you. So now, in this next slide, let's think about different activities. When, where, how can we promote language growth? You could give me any activity, any time of the day, but here's a really good visual. Anything you are doing with your child, it doesn't matter where you are. They are thinking, you're thinking in terms of words. So thinking is language. If they're looking at something, you're building that, you're fostering that curiosity, and you might tell them about whatever they're interested in. So again, this might be an older child, but if you think about those 5 steps, they're showing an interest. That's their serve. Then you're returning that serve. You're labeling. So you might be using a single word. You might have a discussion. Doesn't matter. There is that complexity that goes through. And you do your turn taking. But you could do it when you're outside, when you're inside. You could do it during bath time. You could do it when you're cooking, when they're having to pack up. Different seasons, when you're in the car. It doesn't matter wherever you are. When they're with you, it's an opportunity for a language enrichment activity. And you don't necessarily need sophisticated toys. You don't need technology. Just being there, discussing things with them, that's communication. Now, this is a slide where I've just brainstormed a few conversational topics. And sometimes we think about, what can we talk to our children about, right? If we don't have toys or there isn't a book, what might we talk about? Actually, children are very curious beings. So you could talk to them about literally any topic. Show them a YouTube video, listen to a podcast. It doesn't matter, listen to a TED Talk. They are fantastic platforms to use to learn something new, learn about a topic, discuss a topic, explain things to them. Because you know what, as adults, I'm always learning with my children, because there are so many times I don't know about some things and they are the ones that are teaching me. Or if we watch a YouTube clip about something, that's when I learn. And I'll give you an example of when this happened. I was reading a book about bees and them making honey and how they make honey. And it was a beautiful story. I've shared that link with you for online stories, but it was a beautiful story about how bees need different, they need to pollinate, they need flowers, but I didn't realize bees actually vomit, and that vomit is honey. But it was all part of an informational video. And learning with the kids, it allowed for a discussion. It allowed for me as an adult to go, oh, wow, yeah, I had no idea about how bees actually make honey. But because it was a shared learning and a shared experience, the children were able to remember it for a very long time. And I'm quite confident, even now, if I were to ask that child, oh, do you remember how the bee makes honey? I'm pretty confident they'll be able to tell me a year later on. But because it's a shared conversation and you're learning together, and that serve and return during the interaction is how they learn. But I've talked about, movies. A lot of the times our children want to watch movies and TV shows. It's actually a wonderful way to, if it's a movie and you can afford to pause it or something, obviously not too many times, but have a discussion. You can have a discussion about the characters, the storyline, what are they doing, why are they doing it, and is it appropriate for them to do it? There is so much learning that goes on. And it teaches these kids vocabulary. It teaches them words within sentences. It teaches them the sequence of events. It teaches them story skills. And all of these are language skills that are extremely important for them to have in school. So anytime you are having a wonderful conversation with them, it's never a wasted time. The other thing that doesn't happen very regularly, and look, lots of people might be doing it, but music. Now, when we are listening to music, I know I listen to music and I don't really pay attention to a lot of the lyrics, right? But if there are children that love music, actually talking to them about the lyrics, what does the song mean? Whether it's a nursery rhyme or it's a pop song or R&B, it doesn't matter. Let's take Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars, for instance. Stars are up in the sky, they're little and they twinkle. So we know the song, but we have an opportunity to actually explain the meaning of these different words to our children. And so that's a bit of the conversational topics, the different activities we can have during the course of the day. And with that, you can see a lot of it doesn't actually require expensive toys. It doesn't require lots of technology. If you have it, it can be used, but if you don't, that's also okay. And we're coming to a bit of a conclusion. So I've added a few websites. And if you can see my cursor. So this one, Tiny Steps Make Big Strides. That's actually one where I've taken some of these resources from. They have a number of free resources on their website for early learning with literacy, with oral language, and they're a wonderful website to just visit, to have a look. And they have a shop as well where you can purchase the resources. The second one is Bookshare Time. Now, this is a website by a speech and language pathologist in Australia, and she has categorized different books. Now, these would be Australian titles and stuff, but she has categorized them according to age. And it's a wonderful website to visit because she will tell you what sort of tips and tricks to use when talking about a book, when discussing words. So this is a fantastic time when you're reading, and in fact, reading is a massive part of a child's life. They don't necessarily have to know how to read, but as an adult, you have the opportunity to engage them in a beautiful story. Act it out, be theatrical, don't be too shy. And if you don't want to read it, the fourth additional resource, which is storylineonline.net. They have a beautiful online library of free stories. And this is an American website where actors and actresses have actually narrated these stories, and they're animated. And I love to use this website with a lot of the children that I work with, because I have an opportunity to pause the story. I don't let the children watch it throughout because I love a discussion. What are they thinking, and why might the children be thinking about different things? Then the Banter Speech website has a beautiful blog and a lot of information on speech, language, stuttering. Again, most of these are Australian resources, but they have wonderful information that you would be able to access. The next one is the Developing Child at Harvard, and that's the serve and return video that I had linked earlier in the presentation. Speech Pathology Australia has beautiful fact sheets and communication milestone sheets as well. So just to give you more of an inkling to speech, language, communication. And then the last website is for speech and language therapists in Kenya. So if you wanted to access them as a resource, they have a web page and they could be contacted. So that's it. Thank you. I'm open for a question and answer round.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Artie. Wow, that was very useful information. So do we have any questions either here on Zoom, people watching us on YouTube, Facebook? Please go ahead. Artie is ready now. Being bombarded by our questions.
Right, maybe I'll start. So Artie, thank you so much for a very rich and detailed presentation about building child language skills. I'm curious about the early stage of language, and especially when it comes to, let's say, a nonverbal child in the autism disorder spectrum. What are the early signs that can be seen and that can be encouraged that a child is effectively wanting to speak, to start to speak?
Okay. So usually, and this, you can also find this information in that first webinar, but between 12 to 18 months, now these are, I'm talking about Western norms, and I think globally it's not that different, but between 12 to 18 months, we want our children to be speaking at least their first words. And we want them to have, even if it's single words, about 20 to 30 words in the expressive language, and to actually know that our understanding is usually higher than what we can say. So if you tell them, you say, get the ball or something like that, you want to know that they're understanding it, but then you want them to be able to have about 20 to 30 words within the 12 to 18 months. And if they haven't had their first words by 18 months, I would really encourage you, anyone who's listening, to seek out a speech and language pathologist. Look, sometimes you might get people saying that, oh, they'll be okay, they'll take their time, or if it's gender, because they're a boy, maybe they're late. But actually, no, between 12 to 18 months they should have their first words, and if they don't, it's always better to seek out professional advice and go, why isn't it? A speech and language pathologist might say, actually, have you had their hearing checked? And that's one of the first things we would say is, get your hearing checked. Children tend to get a lot of ear infections. We want to make sure that they're hearing all the speech sounds and words at all different frequencies. So yeah, really, if they don't have their first words by 18 months, that's a red flag. the other things I would look out for is how are they communicating? Words is one thing, but how else? Are they always crying? Are they, are they able to take your hand and take you to what they want? Or are they able to bring something to you to indicate that, oh, this is what I want? Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other question? Any other questions? Well, I think I have one.
Excuse me?
Hello? I think Victor has a question. Victor?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
yes. Okay, greetings to you all.
Hello, hi.
So thank you very much for this rich information. But what's on my mind, I just wanted to find out, are there any, modifications or accommodations when it comes to children who are hyper and inattentive? How can we go about, going through that process of ensuring that, for example, if we are to use music, how is there any modifications that you can talk about or accommodations?
First of all, how old is the child and what sort of an activity? So when are they? When do you feel like they might be hyper, as you're putting it?
So, majority of the kids we meet who are on the spectrum, majority of them are nonverbal, and they are, they are always walking from one side, from one place to another, from one activity. Like, it's very challenging to let them settle. But yeah. I tend to believe that developing a receptive language needs you to be able to somehow pay attention to the person giving the command, or issuing the verbal prompt. So I don't know, how is there any accommodation that can be made to attend to such kids?
Yeah. So really, with that kind of thing, you're also looking at expertise from an occupational therapist, which and they work in the field of sensory regulation, emotional regulation, those kind of areas, to see what is actually getting the child to be over that sort of. So we have a calm state, and then there is the hyper and there's the hypo. So under and over, and what is getting them to be over, what's getting them to be under, and they need to be at the calm state, which is the regulated state, to be able to attend. They're concentrating to process that information. So that is so I would be limited in answering that part of the question. But what I could perhaps tell you about is what is the child interested in. So learning about their interests, do they like outdoor activities? Do they like to touch and feel things? And what sort of textures might they like? So learning a little bit about it. And then maybe putting a visual schedule. So what to do first, this is what we're going to do first, and a picture for an activity you're going to do first, what to do next, and what to do. So 2 or 3, and following through with those activities and making different activities as part of the routine so it becomes consistent, as opposed to changing it every day. Because if there is a change every day, they don't know what's coming. So they're the different accommodations. I would be very happy to send you some information or websites that have relevant information, particularly like general strategies for children with autism, if that's helpful. Yeah. But
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's all right.
I have another question. Nina, is it okay for me to ask another question?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. So Arti, I really like the way you broke down the process of speech and the different stages and the importance of repetition. But I would like to get a bit more granular, and I would like to know about something particular I've noticed with regard to nonverbal children. I've noticed that they have less activity with their tongue. I mean, the tongue is not moving as much. And is there anything that should be reinforced to encourage the usage of the tongue by the child?
That's a really interesting question. So when we're talking about motor, so mouth development and stuff like that, really it begins at a very early age. So, you know, when children start to mouth objects and they're curious about the textures, and when they put something in their mouth, their tongue might not have a lot of control at first, but as they grow older, it tends to have more control over, like when they might point, or they might suck something, or if they're eating, you know, different food textures and they're having to manipulate the food in their mouth, so they're having to move their tongue in a very precise way. And as the child gets older, that control and the strength of the tongue increases, but it requires a lot of from when they're kids, they're really mouthing those objects and they're having foods that are different textures and different consistencies to be able to get their tongue to manipulate it. And whether that, it's with that lack of activity, there is a lot of, I think it's a bit controversial as well. So if you're talking about tongue in terms of speech sounds, then you really want to work on the speech sounds. But with the child being nonverbal, that's a bit difficult. So perhaps even looking at the different food types, or what is the child eating, what different textures. If they're eating puree, for instance, or really soft foods, then they're not really having to work as much, and it's quite simple for the food to go down and they're not having to chew it. So is that something you could possibly be looking at? I'm not too sure. So my apologies, I haven't given you a grand answer there.
It's okay. I realize my question is very particular, but I just wanted to have your thoughts, because it's something that I've noticed, that there was less activity when it comes to the way the tongue is being moved, or it's not controlled the way a neurotypical child will control its tongue. So I just noticed that, and I thought it would be maybe an avenue for research or for
And sometimes even the muscle tone of the tongue, right? Like it could be quite floppy. So when the tongue isn't controlled well, it's a low muscle, it could be a low muscle tone as well. So there are lots of different factors to consider for it. And it might, we can certainly talk about it. And, you know, I might have a lot more questions to ask you, and we could have thing, because it might even be an occupational therapist involved, you know, with the muscle tone. And
Okay. Thank you.
Is there another question? Well, I think I have one. Can I?
Of course, go for it.
Yes, I wanted to know if you have, when I say you, not you particularly, but speech therapists in general, do you have like some signs or criteria that can make you think like, oh, now that child is ready to communicate verbally? Like, for example, if the child is able to understand simple instruction, or to understand what you are telling him or her, or if a child is capable of imitating you, or so And then, oh yeah, and the last thing, if the child is also able maybe to try to articulate some sounds, is some criteria or signs that can make you think that now the child is ready to learn or to communicate verbally?
Yeah. So I'm going back to communication like milestones. So if you think of, say, a 4 to 6 month old, when they start babbling and they go ma, 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 ba, 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 da, 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 and they're just playing around with their sounds and their sequences. And this is when they're about 6 months old, right? So they've already started practicing their vocalizations there. They've started doing the so different sound sequences as well. So they've gone to ma, da, pa, ta, and then they're slowly starting, the word mum or dad, for instance, and they're having to listen, they're having to imitate. But that babbling is an indicator almost of them going, okay, their first words. But if you are saying if it's a non-verbal child, again, that is not my area of expertise, but depending on what sort of vocalizations they have, or is it what sort of babbling, I would want to know what's the sound sequence and what's the, are they doing ma, ma, ma? Are they doing it for a longer period, or are they stretching it out? Can they then say mum? Can they look at you and repeat after you? So again, it's a specific question which has a lot more questions to it, and also requiring that observation of the child. What is the child actually doing? So it hasn't answered your question, but that sort of babbling is part of that developmental milestone. So they babble first and then go on to their first words at around, the 12th month, their first birthday mark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when it comes to autism spectrum disorder specifically, one of the challenge is, and I don't know if you have the answer, or maybe Victor, who is also in the field, maybe he'll have an answer, I don't know. It's a little bit challenging because, like, if I take the example of our son, his development was normal, if I can say so. And then from the age of 3, 4, there was just like a shutdown. Even when I talk about his, that he had a normal development, I'm also talking about speech. He would say mommy perfectly. He will imitate some of the things, and then all of a sudden, nothing. So we have to teach him again some of the things he used to do when he was very young, at an old age, if I can say so. So yeah, so it's just a discussion I'm throwing out there. We may not necessarily not have the answer, but yeah, it's a little bit hard to understand.
Yeah. And that we have these things that, like, so we would call them word shapes, and that ma, 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 it's a consonant and a vowel. So that's easy to say, right? Ma. That's easier to say than map. There is a consonant, a vowel, and then another consonant. So that's actually requiring lots of manipulation. But if it's there is a sequence of some sounds being easier than others, but it could be that consonant, vowel, then consonant, vowel, consonant, and then going to either consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. So like lost. Now we're getting into blends, and they're quite difficult to say. But if you even started with single words, for example, more, I don't know with what sort of sounds he has, but yeah, more, food, and just really almost single syllables might be something to look into. For that, yeah. But it's an interesting question, and I think again, one person is different to the next, so really hiring that assessment and observation and going what exactly is he doing when he's trying to communicate?
Okay.
I have a follow-up comment. That's not really a question, but I tend to think that the child personality also come into play, especially when language is not developed at just at certain milestone. And so you see that there is certain, the child becomes shy or not confident. And I think there is a role to play, by parents to boost the child confidence and encourage and also play the role of vocalizing in the background and doing a lot of things that child do when they develop normally. They talk to themselves, they comment, they like commentators to what they do. I think it's important for parents to play that role, to compensate sort of, and then encourage the child, boost his or her confidence, and really believe that, okay, I can do this, like swimming, for example. Yeah.
And Giselle, I just wanted to add that while the child is maybe nonverbal, isn't able to say, communicate, using words, we do have other systems in place, and we call them augmentative and alternative communication, where it might be through different visuals, or might be through a communication. So there are a few different types of communication devices, and it might be that as they're not able to say those words, they might be better with picture representations, and they might go, if I point to a couple of pictures, it might actually, that those two pictures might they indicate a sentence. So it might be a picture of I and a picture of a drink. I want to drink, and pointing to those two pictures means that they want to drink, and they've gotten that message across. So while they're developing, and we're not too sure on when that development comes, you have these other supports in place to get, there is sign language, there is the picture system, and now with technology, there are a few apps that would actually in consultation with a speech and language pathologist, to support and enhance communication.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe if I can also have an input concerning the question that Nina, you had asked.
Yes.
If I get you clearly, it's like you wanted to know, why is it that these kids start growing normally to a certain age, then all of a sudden the speech, the little things they had started saying disappears. Yeah. So what I know, and the host can also put in the input, there is that level, the 3 levels of language formation, which involves first the formation, how the sounds form. And from there is the content. The content is how the words that we give kids, how we label things. This a plate, this a spoon, come, go, give. That's a content that the child, as the speaker said, those are the things the child first receive and understands. Once they understand, then they are able to express themselves. They start using that content. So there's that part of formation, then the content, then the use of that content. So in children who are on the spectrum, it has said you will realize that the diagnosis of a child on the spectrum will mostly be proved if the child is between 2.5 or 3. Yeah. So it is evident that something happens to the brain wiring that somehow, to some, as we said, they are not all of the same. To some, something happens that formation becomes disrupted, so that the child can be able to just make sounds. Like there is a child who just do but you cannot hear sounds that you can really place that this is an articulated sound, just like sound or sound poo or sound boo. So that means if those sounds are not formed, then it becomes hard for the child to come up with any coherent. They may make sounds, but those sounds may not one that you can place. Then from there, it becomes very disrupted. So it has been said, environment and our communication is very unstructured. We give informations, we talk about so many things. So if the child feels there is much to process than they can do, then it can cause a shutdown.
Yeah.
But now, during the interaction and intervention, the speech therapists do analysis, they do assessment. They will be able to find out if these sounds are there, but the child is not using, or is what we call he has a poverty of those sounds. Then what they will do, they will now start enriching the sounds articulation. Then from there now, once the child has enough, we can say he's rich in those sounds, then now he can be given the content. So without those content, it's just like somebody talking to you in Chinese. You don't have the enough content in Chinese, so you cannot use it. So that's what happens, that some will go not using language because they don't have that content. But once the speech therapists are able to assess and analyze and prove it that the sounds are formed and they can be enriched, then now they start being given what we call the categories, the semantic categories, knowing furniture, knowing animals, knowing, utensils. Then once they are rich enough, they can start using such things. But it's true that there's those who will remain non-verbal until their adulthood because there was a disruption in the formation stage. So once sounds are not formed, then you may not be able to even capture the content in terms of their articulation and so on. So they may learn other form of communication, but not articulated speech. I don't know if that one answers something there.
Yes. Yes. Yes and no. Anyway.
Yeah. Yes, no, because what happens, so far, the research has not told us exactly what happens to make some kids lose entire, articulation and all those, and what makes some retain it. But because, it's just brain behavior, nobody knows or determines how brain will behave in a certain circumstance. Yeah. But now what we deal with what has formed. Then from there, we find out. So when the speech therapists do assessment and they tell us there is possibility of more sounds being formed, then they will work on those forms, then they will work on content, and from there now the child can be trained how to use the language they have achieved. But before you receive the language, before you have it, you cannot use it.
Okay.
I think, Giselle, each child needs to actually so the speech and language pathologist will need to consult to see what's actually happening, and within that to then go in the intervention to go, do they need supportive communication devices and a platform where something else is also, they're able to use something else to help them communicate. And then in terms of the actual speech and vocalizations, there is a lot that goes within that in terms of assessment, and observation. So quite a detailed process.
Thank you so much. So Geoffrey, I don't know, have you? Yes? Hello?
Kindly, kindly I request to leave the meeting. I have a session that is starting in the next 5 minutes, so I have to prepare.
We actually
Okay,
finished. I'm going to finish soon.
Okay, thank you very much, the speaker. That was very interesting, and I'm looking forward for the website links.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll send-
thank you. Bye.
Bye, Victor. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, Nina, you're asking a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know, did we receive any questions on YouTube or Facebooks?
No questions so far, but I'm assuming, because I've checked on all the pages, no question has been asked yet on Facebook. But I'm thinking what we can do, because I think more people watch later, then we'll have to forward those questions to Arti just to respond to them.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Do we have any, maybe a last question before we close? Because we've been now, we say we'll do it for an hour and the time is up now.
For me, it's not, for me,
Anybody?
for me, it's not a question. I just wanted to thank Arti for the quality of our presentation and the importance of this field of practice. So thank you very much. Thank you for the resources you have shared and all the tips. I think it's very important. Probably thank you also for working late. I don't know what time is it in Australia.
Oh, that's my
Thank you.
And there's somebody, two people on YouTube, one by the name Peter Musheru, saying thank you very much for this great session. And then we've got Julian Kabirigi. Thank you for this session. Thank you so much. I think it's really, yeah.
You're very welcome. Please, feel free to share it. And look, you have my contact. Send me a message. I'm happy to consult. I'm happy to help you with your projects and be a partner. So
Thank you. Raha, do you have any comment before we leave? Or
no, yeah, I'll just say again, thank you, Arti. That was an excellent presentation, very clear, concise, and very interesting to follow. And we've learned a lot about building language, and we hope we'll get to do more such webinars with you. Thank you. Yeah.
Keep me posted. While my expertise isn't solely in autism, a lot of the speech language literacy elements would tie in and someone might benefit from it. Yeah.
Arti, I mean, I think we've all said thank you. We will never say thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking your time and putting together such a good and clear presentation, which, I mean, it will be useful, and it is useful for all our children and as parents as well. So thank you so much for partnering with us, and I know it won't be the last partnership. It won't be the last partnership. We're really looking forward as well to see you one day in Kenya. You know, Arti is Kenyan, for those who don't know.
By the way.
Yes. So really looking forward the day you'll come to Nairobi and really organize